Is the RM85 a good dirt bike for you? Well, I'm going to break down all the major areas of this bike, what you can expect, why this might be a really great bike for you, or why this might be the worst dirt bike you can choose. This used to be the RM80 until 2002 when Suzuki changed it to the RM85, which gives it a couple extra cc's. But other than that, the plastics, gas tank, changed, updated, and they really haven't changed since. This bike is pretty much the same. You can still buy it brand new, just like this. I think they just offer the large wheel version, where this is the small wheel, which I'll get to that in just a minute. So this is an 85cc, two-stroke liquid-cooled race engine, which means that it has very little bottom end torque. So the power is very low until you get to about 8,000 RPM, and then it turns on like a light switch compared to like a trail bike. So it's and this makes it really hard to learn on, to use the clutch to get going in first gear, because you got to slip the clutch a lot, you got to use the throttle, and it stalls really easily. So if you are a beginner, this is one major downside to starting out on a motocross race bike like this, because this bike specifically has about as little bottom end torque as you can get for a dirt bike, which is super important for riding at low speeds or trail riding or just learning to ride, because when you don't have torque, it doesn't want to accelerate. You got to rev it up really high to get it to accelerate quickly, because it's just buh, 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 buh. And the 6-speed manual transmission is close ratio, so it's easy to keep it in the high RPM when you're shifting gears, but that also means you're going to have to be shifting a lot to keep it in the meat of the power band. This is great for racing because it's easier to keep it high RPM, but if you're a newer rider, it's really challenging to be in the right gear at the right time, be at the right RPM. Otherwise, you're not going to be accelerating very quickly. And when you do get on the pipe or on the power band and you aren't familiar with it, you're new to this, new to riding dirt bikes, it might be a shock. It might be really scary and intimidating, because it's like, and the bike might fly out from underneath you. You might do a wheelie or smash into a tree. So that's why I recommend staying away from these if you're a new rider. But if you're racing on a motocross track or high-speed off-road races, this super lightweight package is really great because it's easy to handle. It's really lightweight. It only weighs around 160 pounds compared to like a 125 trail bike that weighs around 200 pounds. But you got to weigh the pros and cons of each, of how aggressive a bike you want. Now the suspension, it has long travel suspension for a bike this size. It's around 11 inches. It's fully adjustable with compression and rebound clickers, which means that you can slow down or speed up how quickly it compresses or rebounds, which just gives you some fine-tuning adjustment of how stiff or soft it feels based on your weight and your riding style. The shock is also adjustable as well with clickers and the preload for setting the ride height to get the proper sag, which is super important for handling and traction on any bike that you ride on. It has full disc brakes, front and rear, which is good stopping power and won't cause problems compared to drum brake if you're riding in mud and water. Now these motocross two-stroke bikes are really loud from the factory, and even louder when you put a race silencer on them. So if you're riding in a noise-conscious area, be warned, because you might get complained about, because these bikes are really loud. So I recommend either getting a trail bike if you need a quiet bike, or putting an aftermarket, a spark arrestor on them, which will quiet them down a little bit, but they're still going to be a lot louder than a trail bike. Seat height is around 32 inches, I believe, for this model. This is the small wheel, 17, 14-inch wheels. And Suzuki also has the large wheel, or the big wheel, with 19, 16-inch wheels. The large wheel model is just a little bit taller seat height, and it can handle obstacles a little bit better because the bigger wheels roll over them better. So the small wheel is good if you're like 4'10" to 5'2", and the large wheel or big wheel is good if you're like 5 foot to 5'4" inches tall. And the suspension is set up well for 80 to maybe 120 pound rider, depending on how aggressive you are. If you're heavier than that, which it's meant for kids that are like 11 to 15-year-olds. So if you're heavier than 120 pounds, you're probably going to want some stiffer springs. And while this RM85 can be reliable if you maintain it, it's going to require more frequent top-end rebuilds than just about any other bike, because you got to be revving it really high in the RPM range to get power out of it, which means that it's going to wear out faster when you're revving it high all the time. So how long can you expect to go before needing to rebuild the top end? Well, it depends on how you ride and where you ride. If you're riding wide open all the time in sandy conditions, you might only get 5 or 10 hours before it starts losing compression and you need a new piston ring or even a new piston. Yeah, I know that sounds insane, but these things can wear out quickly if you're really hard on them. But if you're more of a casual racer, or you're not on the pipe all the time and you're not riding in sandy, muddy conditions, you're doing regular air filter and oil changes, you might get 20, 30, 50 hours before needing to rebuild the top end. And if you're riding at lower or mid-range RPM, you might get 100 hours before you need to re-ring it. And as long as the cylinder's fine, you only need a piston and or rings, which is $100 or less, depending on which brand you go. So it's more or less a maintenance item on these bikes, and it's fairly easy to do in a couple hours if you have a service manual and some pretty basic tools. How much can you expect to spend on one of these? Well, it depends on the year and the condition, as well as your local market, because in Minnesota here, they might be cheaper or more expensive than like Texas or Maine or California. Something like this is an 05. In average condition, you're probably going to spend $1,500 to $2,000. Something that's going to need work, probably less than $1,200. But if it's a newer model, as low miles, probably $2,000 to $3,000 for a used one. And some things to be aware of: these bikes, they are race bikes, which may or may not mean it was well taken care of, because if it was maintained by a regular racer and they kept up on the maintenance, it may be a really great bike where they were changing the oil, keeping the air filter clean, doing regular rebuilds, and not letting anything get broken or worn out. But someone that didn't maintain it, the engine is going to have lower compression, the air filter is probably going to be really dirty, may be hard to start, it might not want to stay running. Just some simple signs that it might need some work if you want it to run well, be reliable, and last a long time. So if you haven't figured it out by now, you should not get this bike if you're looking for your first dirt bike, something that requires as little maintenance as possible, something that's easy to ride with good, smooth, predictable power. But this is an excellent choice if you're looking for a less expensive race bike compared to like a KTM, which is generally $1,000 or $2,000 more. But this is going to be a great starter bike if you're 11 to 15-year-old, or if you want a mid-size race bike that has a lot of power, is super fun to ride, and you're going to be riding out in the open, or if you just want something that requires you to have better clutch and throttle control and is going to really teach you to be precise with your technique. And if you are looking for your first mid-size dirt bike, then you should check out this video here where I break down all the best models based on your preferences. Or if you just want to become a safe and confident trail rider, then you should check out this video on how you can do that without taking years to learn. I'm Kelly Fager, and I want you to start out on the right bike so that you don't crash and get hurt right away, because I hear it time and time again. Someone started on the wrong bike, they flip it or they smash into a tree, and I hate hearing that. So choose the right bike, ride safe, and have fun.